Welcome to the Determined People podcast. We are committed to spreading encouragement, strength, and hope to a world in desperate need of it. Everywhere you look in today's culture, you see stories of remarkable people experiencing remarkable success. Our show focuses on the backstories of everyday, relatable people who have achieved greatness in their lives. We focus on the story behind what we see in the world. Our hope is that you find yourself in these stories, that you say, if that person made it, so can I. And now, our host, John Harrell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here, and I'd ask you to do me a favor before we get started. Would you hit that subscribe button? We are committed to spreading encouragement, strength, and hope into a world that's in desperate need of those things. And I think if you look at the state of our world today, our divided culture, we need those things. We need to hold on to hope, especially. Now, our world is full of, a lot of tragedy, a lot of good, but also one of the greatest challenges that we face as adults, men and women, is the pain of loss. My guest today is Chris Almendarez. He is the president of the Round Rock Express, but we're not really going to talk baseball today. We're going to talk about in June of 2015, his wife, Jana, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma. It's a 100% very aggressive, very fatal brain cancer. And we're going to talk about how he kept it together with his family and kept his career going and just held it together in probably the most chaotic year of his life. He lost her in May of 2016. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the legacy that Jana has left. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So we'll start off, and you and Jana met when you were 21 years old. How did you meet?
Well, I was a college baseball player, and I would come home. I was actually playing at Howard Junior College in Big Spring, Texas, out in West Texas, and came back home for the summer and was actually waiting tables. My brother was a manager of a sports bar, and I was waiting tables, and she came in. It was actually during the 1994 summer, and the Houston Rockets were playing in the NBA Finals, and so her and a couple of her friends were coming in, and we just kind of, I saw her and wanted to get to know her, and little did I know that we would have this life together.
Wow. So she walked into the restaurant you were working in, but you all went out. But you asked her to marry you a month later. I mean, how did you know?
Well, it's funny. The other guy that I worked with, the other waiter, every pretty lady that would walk in, we would talk about, hey, I'm going to go talk to her. And I said, that's my future wife. And he's like, you're absolutely crazy. And we started talking to her. And a couple of weeks later, I actually asked her out. And she finally said yes. The very first night, we went to Papacitos in Humble, Texas, and had a great dinner. And then she was actually house sitting for her parents. Her parents were in Santa Fe that weekend, and she went home to their house, and I went out. I actually went out with a couple of my buddies that were getting back from college, and we kind of had a late night, and I got home, and I got a call at 3:30 in the morning. My father was in a motorcycle accident. My stepmom had called me and said, hey, we need to go see him. He's at Northwest Hospital, and she lived about 15 minutes from me, but I remember that night getting the phone and talking to Kathy and hanging the phone up, and simultaneously someone knocking on the door, and she was at the door and she was crying. She said, Chris, he was killed. And I was like, no, he's not. Someone took his wallet. Let's figure this thing out. And we drive across town to the hospital. And I just remember walking into kind of this waiting room, and this DPS officer, he's about 6'5" African-American guy, walked in and said, I need somebody to come identify the body. And my stepmom kind of collapsed. I was like, I'll do it. And we walked down this hall and opened the door and pulled the sheet back in. There was my dad. And so, when you go through something like that, I had an unbelievable time dinner earlier that night with Jana. I actually saw my dad that afternoon go to dinner at Jana, and then now I'm identifying on this table. And so, it's just kind of a very surreal thing. We were talking about that earlier when you see something like that. And of course, this was before cell phones. And so Jana, I didn't have her parents' number. I called her apartment and said, hey, we had planned on going out the next night. And I just said, hey, we're not going to be able to go out tomorrow night. Something happened. There was an accident. I'll call you in a couple of days and let her know. And then the next morning we met with the Catholic Church, St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church. Father Paul Porcello was the priest at the time, and he changed my life.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
How did he change your life?
I came in and I think I was in a spot. I just finished playing junior college baseball. Actually, that afternoon, I told my dad that I was going to go to play at Texas Tech University. They had offered me some financial money, a preferred walk on, and I told my dad, I said, "Hey, look at Lubbock. I know I'm 8 hours away right now in Big Spring, but now I'm going to be 10 hours away in Lubbock." And he's like, "Look, whatever you want to do, that's fine." And I that was the decision I told him, and then of course this happened, and everything kind of got to the we need to figure out the funeral arrangements and stuff like that. And so, but I met Father Paul, and we were not involved in the church. I think I was kind of just looking for the right direction. But Father Paul came in, and in the Catholic Mass, there's a part of the homily which is basically the sermon, and he said, during that time, you three boys and a few brothers, you guys are gonna have to talk about your dad. And so I said, "Sir, I can't do that." And the first thing he went to scripture, and he said, Luke 1:37, all things are possible with God. And I wrote my dad a letter, and just, a couple of days later, we had the funeral, and basically wrote the letter to my dad, and just wanted people to know what he meant in my life at that time. And probably one of the most gratifying things I've ever did at that point. And a couple of days later, after his funeral, Jan and I went out, and we, she believed in me from day one. And I think when you go through something like that, for me, it's like what I wanted in my life. I wanted a family. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to coach T-ball. And, Jana believed in me. And I remember I was doing some therapy with Father Paul, and the first week, okay, would love for you to get back into the church, and here's the RCIA program and how you can get your sacraments. I was baptized Catholic, but we kind of broke away from the church. And so, got and visited with him about that, and then 2 weeks later I'm like, "Hey, I bought a ring." He's like, "Whoa, slow down." And so yeah, I just did it, and one of the best decisions I ever made in my life.
Right. What you told me, she saw something in you that maybe you didn't even see in yourself.
No, that's one thing she always said. I was a young kid, but I was very mature at a young age. And we came from a broken home growing up. There was some some tough days, and domestic violence, some child abuse, some things that my dad was looking back, my dad was an alcoholic. And we would see him every couple of weeks, every other week, and the weeks in between them, it was my mom, a single mom, and she did the best that she could. She was, I think, always in survival mode with three little boys. But
I'll say
she we converted our garage into a beauty shop, and so she would do a lot of the teachers, so we never could get in trouble. So everybody knew who the Almendarez boys were. But my mom did a great job. Look, she taught me an unbelievable work ethic, and I remember seeing her early in the morning doing hair and standing on her feet all day, and till 9 o'clock at night, and her hands would come in and just be cramped up from doing hair. And the one thing I remember my mom always telling me as a young kid is, you've got this gift to play the game of baseball, and use that to your advantage. And my dream, of course, like every kid, was to be a Major League Baseball player. And when I was 7 years old, the Houston Astros signed the biggest free agent of the time, a guy by the name of Nolan Ryan. He was the first $1 million athlete. He signed a 4-year deal with the Astros of $4 million. And so the neat thing about Nolan is him and I share the same birthday. So at 7 years old, I always thought there was going to be a connection between Nolan Ryan and myself. And little did I know, years down the road, I would be the president of his baseball team. And so
at 7 years old, you thought that?
I don't know if it was just trying to practice his autograph and emulating his high leg kick. But, it's like I tell my kids, he was the Shohei Ohtani of the time, or the Mike Trout of the time. And he's playing for our, hometown Houston Astros. And so we would go to the Astrodome, and we got to see him pitch one of the very first games when he was here with the Dodgers, when the Astros played the Dodgers. But yeah.
Wow, that's cool. And he was the first person clocked it throwing 100 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, first person clocked 100 miles per hour. He also won a World Series with the New York Mets. But again, for me, look on the back of that baseball card, when I saw January 31st, I thought that was pretty cool to show the same birthday.
And Jana was January 30th, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so y'all were very close. Man, that night your dad died, though, I keep thinking you went through a roller coaster of emotions. I mean, from a high on going out with her to loss of your father. But moving along, when I was reading about Jana, preparing for today, I kept seeing this one theme: love God, love others. And it sounded like that was the theme of her life. But tell us about Jana. What was she like?
No, Jana was an amazing lady. Was fortunate for her to come to my life at that time. I look back now and I think, I was kind of in a spot of like, do I want to continue to play baseball? What am I going to do with my life? I'm close to, 2 years to graduate. What do I want to be? And Jana was 4 years older than me. But I think she'd had some of her struggles as well as trying to figure out what she were. And we just came into each other's lives at the right time. The one thing that I always tell people is she just believed in me, and she saw something in me that, like you said earlier, I don't even think I saw in myself. And I think having someone that believes in you and willing to roll the dice and say, hey, let's see what happens. And she was up for an adventure, and I think that was a neat thing. And the other thing that I would say is, when I went through the RCIE process to become Catholic and make my sacraments, she actually did this, enrolled in the class as well. We went through it, but right before the Easter Vigil, when you make all the confirmations, she decided not to go forward with it. Now I did, and so we were able to get married in the Catholic Church that August. And then after we got married, she said, I want to go back through it. And she went actually through the RCIE process twice. And she went
It's like doing SEAL training twice.
Exactly. Well, and it's great because I think that's what, she needed to learn it. She needed to know our faith, and going through it twice. I tell people she became Mother Teresa, and she would call me out on things and knew the faith better than I. And that was the thing. I think that's the thing that always kind of connected us, was our faith. And early on when we were struggling, we could always lean on, all things are possible with God. And the model, love God, love others. It's funny, like you said earlier in the introduction, we're living in a divided world right now, and it's pretty simple. I think sometimes we do these things to ourselves, but it's like, love God, love others, be kind, and just do the right thing. And it's like, if you would do that, life would be so much easier. But we get caught up in our egos and caught up in all other things that happen. And so that was one of the things. I think she held me accountable.
That's great. We do get caught up in those things. It's like today's culture is, look at me. Look at me. We have, Facebook, Instagram, and everything else, which you can look at me and how many likes do I get and all that, which is just a bunch of hollow stuff, really, when you get down to the final analysis. But tell us about the early years when y'all were married. Y'all were 22 or so. You were 22, she's 26. You hardly even know who you are at that point and who you're married. Tell us about the early years. What were they like?
It's funny. I tell people it's kind of a roller coaster. We got married August 5th of 1995, and we went off to Jamaica for a honeymoon, had a great time. I found a ATM receipt on August 10th of that year. I mean, it was a couple of days when we're going off in our honeymoon, and I think I had like $36 in my account. We were dirt poor, but we were going to make it happen. And we went to Jamaica like we were the big time, biggest couple ever. It's funny because my mother-in-law talks about, she tells my boys now, your dad and your mom, really struggled. And I think when you go through something like that, you appreciate the things later in life that you've accomplished. And so, we went to Jamaica and we got back, and boy, 9 months later, we had a little boy named Chase that was born. And so, I tell people we got married, we had a baby, and I mean, life is just, and then we moved to Round Rock.
The only thing that could have made your life more challenging at that point was if you actually took up coaching t-ball at that point.
Exactly.
That's like a Three Stooges episode or something with little kids, right? So how did you move? Because you were in pharmaceutical sales out of college. How did you move into baseball? How did that transition occur?
I like to say divine intervention. We actually moved. I worked for a pharmaceutical company. We moved to Round Rock in 2000. I worked for a company called Novartis, and I was with them 8 years, and I had a chance to go work for a sports construction company. But, I think it's neat that I have two boys that are kind of trying to figure out what they want to do. Chase, my oldest son, is a head baseball coach, and Luke just graduated. But remember being that age and trying to figure out what do I want to do. And I love competing, whatever, on the baseball field, on the football field, and in high school. Just the job I had in pharmaceuticals was an opportunity to go sell the product and differentiate my blood pressure medication against the other guy. And, I always believed that, look, you don't have to be the smartest guy, but if you work the hardest, that goes a long way. And so, we did a lot of events at Dell Diamond, and I was a season ticket holder. I would do some entertaining in the United Heritage Center, and had the opportunity to meet Reed Ryan, the original founder and the first president of the Round Rock Express. And
Reed is Nolan's son.
Reed is Nolan's oldest son.
Okay.
And so just kind of come in contact. And then in 2006, there's a pitcher by the name of Travis Driscoll who pitched for the Express. And I had the opportunity to coach both of his boys. His son Tanner and Chase were the same age, and his son Tyler and Luke were the same age. And so coaching them, and as you know, when you start coaching youth baseball and you're spending a lot of time with those families, we had an unbelievable experience with all those families, and having some of the access to Dell Diamond because of Travis. And Travis actually connected me with Reed, and Reed's son Jackson was Luke's age, and won the opportunity to coach with us. And they were at a breakfast one morning, and he's like, "You played Chris, right?" And Travis said, "Yeah." He's like, "Chris is the best. It's about teaching the game, having fun, and just playing the game the right way." And Reed reached out to me. We kind of went back and forth, and the next day we ended up having lunch, and, "Hey man, I want you to coach. I want to coach with you." And it was actually the fall, and I was like, "Hey, well, we're going to kind of take a break and get back in the spring." He's like, "Oh, the spring's crazy for me when baseball season starts. Come on, let's do the fall. We can practice at Dell Diamond." And I remember going home that night and telling Jana, I was like, "Reed wants to coach, and man, I don't know, Jana." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Your childhood idol's son. It wants you to coach with his grandson." And it worked out, and the relationship has grown, and that was kind of our first connection. Jan and Nicole, Reed's wife, were close, and our families became close. We started vacationing together and just doing different things. And I think the trust level between both of us came through, and Reed saw my work ethic. And in 2009, I had the company I was working for, Skin Medica Pharmaceuticals, was downside. We actually got bought out, and I had an opportunity and I shot an email to some of my closest friends, said, "Hey, I don't know what God's plan is, but keep me in your prayers." And Reed called me that night and said, "Hey, we need to talk. It's time you come work for the Round Rock Express." And little do we know, here I am.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I love it. What are you talking about? You get the opportunity to work with your childhood idol's grandson? Come on. Yeah. Good for her. Did you and Jana pray together?
We did. That was one of the things early on in our marriage. Some of the struggles, sometimes you're trying to figure out which bill are you going to pay. And Chase was very sick early on, very jaundiced, and just had RSV and some just some illnesses. And Jana was missing so much work. I guess this would have been in '96 that they were starting to dock her pay because she used all of her vacation. And so I was still in school finishing up, and you kind of get to the bottom of the barrel, and you're trying to figure out what you do. And we would go up to the chapel. The chapel at St. Mary Magdalene was always open 24 hours. And look, I'll share one story. There was one time where it got to the point that I was like, man, maybe I need to quit school and just go get a job and just get this thing going. And we ran up to the chapel, and we were praying in there, and we were crying, and it was probably 9:00 at night. And both of us just remember somebody walking by, and where the rectory was, where the priest would live, was the church was between that, and the office was on the other side. And so Father Paul just happened to be in the rectory and forgot something in his office that night that he needed to go get. And as he walked by, he saw us. And so he came in. I'm sorry, as he was walking by, he saw us. And so he came in. We're trying to clean ourselves up. And, "Hey, Father Paul, what's going on?" And, "No, we're just in here praying." He's like, "No, what's on?" I was like, "Well, it's just tough." And we're kind of told him what our plans were. And he's like, "Hold on, I forgot something in my office. I need to go get." And he ran to his office, and as he walked back, he handed me an envelope. He said, "Here's a little something for you." He's like, "Do not open this. Just get until you get home." And Jan and I prayed, and we got home, and we opened it up, and it was a check for $1,000.
Really?
And
Really? Wow.
we were just in shock. And the next morning we called him, and, "Father Paul, we can't take that." And one thing that he said is, I help people every single day of my life, and a lot of times I don't know who they are, who I'm helping. And I know you guys are trying your best to do the right thing. And I want to just give you a little something. And all I ask is, don't ever pay me back. Just pay it forward."
Yeah.
And that $1,000 was like $1 million to us at that time.
Sure.
And we were able to pay some bills and do some things. And I've been fortunate in my life to pay it forward to certain people when, maybe it's somebody that bought a new house, or maybe it's somebody that just is in a tough spot. And just out of the blue, always go back to remember, hey, here's $1,000 and just go do something.
What a wonderful man.
Yeah.
What a wonderful man. That's just, God puts those people in your life
Yeah.
at the right moments. Is he still alive?
He is not. He was kind of my spiritual leader for the age of 21 until he passed away a month before Jana got diagnosed. And so the toughest time of my life when I really needed him, it was like he was gone, and we talked about earlier, we know where he is. And so I always felt that I had him on my side, and just an amazing human being. I mean, changed my life, brought me to Christ, became a Christian under Father Paul. And, I tell people a lot, I'm a big believer I believe in my faith. I believe in God. I'm Catholic because of Father Paul. I love the religion now and the things I've learned, but had he been Baptist or Protestant or whatever, it was just the person he was. To me, he was the closest thing to Jesus on this earth that I've ever met. And he didn't judge people, and he loved you, and he helped people, and just amazing human being. He was actually Luke's godfather, my youngest sons, and just an amazing person that put me on the right path. And his story was, he was a lay person and a very successful sales manager for a chemical company based out of California. And his wife committed suicide, and then he went into the seminary. And so he was able to kind of live both lives and finish his life as a priest, and became a Monsignor, and just was an amazing human being.
Just that experience in the past, being married, losing a wife to suicide, and all the other things that life gives you, good and bad, prepared him to uniquely help not just you and Jana, but the whole community. So yeah, people like that are a gift. They're a real treasure to have in your life. So June 28th, 2015, your life changed. Why did, was it just in a normal, like an annual physical or anything, or what caused you to go have, Jana to get checked out?
That summer, so at Dell Diamond, we host the UIL state championship high school baseball games. And so always the early June, that time frame, because of our Round Rock Express schedule, our schedule just becomes kind of crazy. So there's a lot of time up there. And so every year I would prepare and say, look, we're about to get into baseball season with UIL in June. It's going to be a busy month. I'm up there. The boys are welcome to come here. You know where I'm going to be. And at that time, she just started having some headaches, and then she started having some low fevers. And, she'd went to the doctor a couple of times, and they thought it was a sinus infection, and they gave her different antibiotics. And she was allergic to penicillin, and so they always kind of had to figure out what's the right antibiotic we could get. But she would take the medication for a couple of days and would still have these low fevers. And we had went to Houston for the weekend to a family reunion, and we left on Friday. We stayed in a hotel Friday night. Saturday we got up, went to the family reunion. We drove all the way back to Austin that night, and so we're leaving Houston, and we stopped at Chick-fil-A and got a sandwich, and she didn't even eat it. She fell asleep, and she slept the whole way. And when she woke up, she said, "Man, my head's just hurting." And I was like, "Jana, if you want to go to the emergency room, we can. If not, let's just wait till the morning. It's probably going to be crazy on a Saturday night, but let's get home, let's take a bath, and just see how it is." And we ended up going home, and we got there. She said, "I think I'll be okay." And the next morning, she woke up, and I just remember her saying she felt like her head was in a vice. And I just remember being asleep that morning and waking up, and I heard the door slam and close, and I jumped up, and she wasn't in the bed, and I ran out and I looked out the window, and I could see her driving off. And so I called her on her cell phone. I go, "Hey, where are you going?" She said, "Chris, my head hurts really bad. I'm going to the emergency room. I'm done. I want to go see what I want to get a CAT scan and see what they say." And all right, well, hold on. You could have woke me up. I would have went, no, you're sleeping. You guys are good. And I was like, okay. So I put my clothes on. I raced over there. And by the time I walked in, she went to St. David's Hospital in Round Rock. And St. David's is one of our partners with the Express. And when I walked in, I saw one of the nurses that would work some of our games. And she said, "Hey, Jana's in room 4 over there." And they already took her back for a CAT scan. We're seeing a lot of meningitis. And so, I think it's maybe spinal meningitis, but, we'll see. And so I walk in and, "Hey, babe, oh yeah, they took me back." She's laying in the bed, and I'm sitting in the chair. And I was actually teasing her because about the year before, Luke was playing football and at football practice, he got slung down on the ground, and he got a stinger, but at the time they thought he really hurt his neck. And it became a big thing. And
Stingers do hurt.
no, they do. But the ambulance picked them up and took in the emergency room right when school got out. Every kids were crying, and the hashtag, this is right when Instagram came out, and pray for Luke. And so I said, hey, I'm going to take, and we've always teased him that at his wedding, we're going to put that picture up there because he went, Chase was off at college, like, Dad, what happened? You know, people are telling me Luke broke his neck. I'm like, Luke's fine. But I said, Jan, smile, I'm going to take a picture and we'll put your picture up next to Luke and pray for Luke and take a picture of her. And then not 2 minutes later, I just remember the door kind of flying open and the ER doctor kind of like slid in. I mean, I tell people it reminded me kind of like a Seinfeld episode where Kramer entering a room and he was kind of panicking. He's like, you're with the Round Rock Express, right? We found a tumor in her head. And I mean, it was almost to the point that I was looking around going, is this somebody playing a joke on me? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, but yeah, she has a tumor and we don't know what it is. And, you know, when it finally sunk in, you just kind of hit. And
was Jana? She was
Jana's in the room. She was right across from me. And we've just kind of looked at each other and you're a little bit in shock.
Sure.
And then, you know, one, there's all types of different tumors. Two, okay, what does this mean? What's the next steps? For me, I start processing in my head, okay, what are the calls? Both boys are at home. My mother-in-law was out of town. My father-in-law was at his house. They live about 5 minutes from us. But my father-in-law was amazing human being, Don Givens, one of the smartest men I've ever knew. Great mentor in my life. And so I was like, all right, I need to call Granddad first. And he's going to be calm. He's going to, you know, let's talk about this and let's figure this thing out. And what I didn't know is Chase had already gotten up and was at his house when I called him. And I said, because I called him first, I go, look, we got to tell the boys, but I want to make sure we're all together when we tell the boys. And so he said, well, actually, Chase is here. I'm going to tell him and we're going to go get Luke and we'll meet you up there. And then he called my mother-in-law. And so, you know, and I kind of processed in my head. At the time, I was working for Reese Ryan. Reed had went to became the president of Houston Astros, so he was already in Houston. But so I called Reed, and kind of just the chain of command with us, and just said, "Look, we don't know anything yet. This is what's going on." And yeah, it's funny to this day. Every June 28th, I mean, this is the 8th year that from that day. That's probably the day that hits me the hardest. The end of June going into July is always a tough week for me because my dad was killed on July 2nd of 1994. So always around July 4th, you know, the trauma that I experienced, your body remembers that. Absolutely. And so that day was always kind of the day that's when my life changed. But then now fast forward to 2015, June 28th. So it's always a tough week. I always wanted to make sure, you know, are we playing? Are we not? Can I get away? And just really want to go enjoy life. But it's always a tough day because that's the day I tell people that they gave me the grenade and handed it to me and pulled the pin. And that's when we're just holding it going, okay, what's going to happen? What is this now? You know, we knew it was a brain tumor. We didn't find out the next day until they didn't tell us. That's when they told us it was a glioblastoma, which is the worst kind of tumor you can get. And so, you know, we made a decision not to Google anything. You know, we believed in our faith and we believe God put this, you know, out there to one. I think the thing we wanted to show people was how you deal with adversity when things happen. You know, I always envisioned we'd be on Oprah and we'd be jumping on the couch like Tom Cruise and saying how we beat this thing. And, you know, we didn't in that sense, but there's a lot of ways that we did beat this thing.
So did you know the odds of surviving a glioblastoma?
I did not. I had wonderful people in my life. Reese Ryan and Reed, you know, when it happened, Reese, you know, the network that those guys have, Don Sanders, Brett Sanders, they did the work for me. Reese Googled it, never told me. And I never knew what that was. And I didn't want to have a date or anything like that. So we never Googled. And after the fact, you know, Reese told me, you know, I Googled that day and, you know, I think it's 14 months is what they give a person when you get that diagnosis.
It's amazing you didn't Google it because that's my default on everything. But I love the testament of faith. First question. I mean, that's a test of your faith. Did you ever get angry with God, or did Jana get angry with God?
I don't think Jana did. In the 11 months that she fought for her life, she might have had 1 or 2 bad days, which is amazing. knowing you got this tumor in your head, you're fighting for your life. You've taken, a round of radiation, a round of chemo, and these steroids. She put on 60 pounds. She lost her hair, and for me, yeah, there was a lot of days. There was a lot of days. There was a lot of nights, a lot of early mornings where, man, I was just angry at God. One of the things, she was an amazing person. Sometimes like, why wasn't it me instead of her? And um, I remember one night, it was 3 a.m, and she had an accident, and I had to give her a bath, a shower at 3 a.m, and I had no strength in me, and I got out of the shower and put her on the bed, and put her in her. Actually, we had a wheelchair at the time, and I just laid in bed and just cried and just cussed God.
Yeah, he can take a punch.
Yep.
I've learned that over the course of my life. He's not sitting up in heaven waiting to strike us down. He would rather we open up our minds and our hearts to him and be who we are in that moment, angry or
Yep.
whatever. He can take a punch. He's not like us. How about your boys? Did that shake their faith any, or what was their faith life like during this period of time?
Both the boys.
Chase was in college.
Yeah. Luke was going into his freshman year of high school. We were more concerned with Luke than Chase at the time. Chase is very mature for his age, but Chase has always been very stoic. He takes after his mom. He's Jana, and I tell people all the time, if you want to know Jana, that's look at Chase, and if you want to know me, look at Luke. And so, but solely different. Chase is very stoic, very put together. I think he kind of dealt with it in his own way. For him, he's not a kid that loves the limelight. He wants to kind of just do his thing and stay under the radar and do the right thing. But, he was off at college. And so the tough thing I think for him was being off at college, having to leave to go back to college was a tough deal for him. But then coming back, seeing how she was going back to college, coming back and seeing, how much worse she was getting, where Luke and I saw it every single day. I mean, you could just see the decline, and we were fortunate. Nicole Ryan had a connection with Wonders and Worries. It's a nonprofit that works with folks with terminally ill parents, and so we had put Luke into kind of a therapy session and kind of their program, and Jacqueline with Wonders and Worries came over to the house and met with us, and both boys, I think their faith is what kind of got them, and their faith came from their mom, and she was their religious education teacher all those years, and just taught them. But I think the way that she carried herself, and she was fine. She knew where she was, like, she knew God had her, whatever was going to happen, and I think that kind of part of the boys' makeup and how they are, and so we were very fortunate to have a lot of resources and people come up and step in and help us, and I think that's what helped the boys get through that time.
Yeah. I mean, what were you going through? I mean, you're in shock, because you are, and you're trying to hold it together. Because as a father, I know you're trying to hold it together and be strong for your children, not let them see you hurting. You want to be strong, but how were you able to hold it together?
The grace of God. I think that you go through shock, and then we went into fight mode. And so it's like, look, we're going to do everything we can to just make sure that we're taken care of. We made the decision to stay here and go to Texas Oncology. We had, through Don Sanders and Brett Sanders set us up with John Stiles at the time was the CEO of MD Anderson, and he was on vacation and playing golf, and called me and said, "Hey, we're getting you guys in this Friday." I mean, that's kind of the access we had to people. And we went down there, and we just felt as a family, we wanted the boys to be in Round Rock, let Luke get off to school, let Chase go to college and be able to come back. And the first thing for us was just kind of making sure to take care of our family. Her parents lived about 5 minutes from us. And so we kind of had a plan of, the Round Rock Express, our ownership and the leadership was just amazing with what they did during that time. Reed was with the Astros, but still part owner of the Express. Reese is who I answered to, and Reese called me every single day. Really? He shot me a text or called me if he was on vacation, wherever he was. He called me just to check on me. Again, he knew what the outcome was going to be. Reed would call me and said, "Look, whatever you need, you guys have. Nolan, Don, all those guys were just unbelievable. And, I think when you have that backing and that support, it helps you. Sure. And, my leadership at the Round Rock Express, my assistant GM at the time was Tim Jackson. And I kind of went part-time, and he kind of just stepped into my role, and my emails were getting forwarded to him. And I mean, he was answering like I would answer him. Laura Fregoso, our senior vice president of marketing, I mean, they just stepped up and helped run the business. And so I was there, but really was I there? I don't know. It's actually the other night, somebody had sent me a clip of when she got diagnosed, and Tim was actually doing the interview, and I forwarded it to Tim, and he's like, man, I don't remember not doing that, that interview. And it kind of seems like a blur, but I'll tell you a couple other things was, one day Jana came in and she said, I need you to do me a favor. And she said, I need you to put music on in your office, and I need it to be Christian music. And I need you to change the culture of Round Rock Express and just have this music. And I like Christian music. She loved it, at that point. And, there's some songs, I Can Only Imagine, and just certain songs that everybody kind of knew, but I would put it on and just listen to it. And, there was a song, the Casting Crowns had a song, Praise You in the Storm.
Yeah, I know.
And then there's another song by Matthew West, Strong Enough. And I listen to those two songs every single day driving to work. Really the Strong Enough by Matthew West, and it talks about God puts you through this. Are you strong enough to make it through? And it was pretty neat because after she passed, I ended up having an opportunity to go see Matthew West in concert, and had a chance to meet him and kind of tell him my story. And so
that's very cool.
Kind of a cool thing.
That personalizes it for him.
Yeah.
That's really very cool, actually. Jana did not make it the full 14 months. That was average time. On May 11th, 2016, you tweeted that Jana's condition had worsened. She had formed blood clots again. Her physicians were doing everything they could to keep her comfortable. And your next step was hospice. But in your tweet was Romans 8:28. Why that verse?
That's always been my favorite verse. In 2006, when I changed jobs and kind of was trying to figure out what I was going to do, I was actually doing a Bible study at the time, and we were reading the book of Romans, and I don't know. That's the scripture that spoke to me, and it's just something that I've always kept in the back of my pocket.
I couldn't quote it in any version, but I can tell you it just means that for believers, God can bring good out of everything.
Yep.
And I've seen it in my life. I know you've seen it in your life. I'm just sitting here thinking
all things work for the good of those who are called according to his purpose.
Absolutely.
That's the thing, is the purpose. And I think sometimes people don't know what their purpose is. And look, this was part of our purpose. It was part of our purpose to show people you're going to go through, we're all terminal, we're all going to go through things, but it's like, how do you carry yourself? And that was the one thing that I think as a family we wanted to show people. And so both of my boys have gotten tattoos with Jana's name on some of their favorite scriptures. And
that's cool.
I'm a scaredy cat. I don't want to do it, but they've always asked what they're doing. And a couple of years ago, my fiance and I, Lindsay, went to Las Vegas, and I teased, and I got a fake stenciled Romans 8:28, and I showed the boys. I finally got one, and they're like, "That's not real." And so my 50th birthday, we were there in January, and I'm getting closer, so we'll see. We'll see.
I read Jana's obituary, and something that was in there. She said, "Don't wear black. Wear bright colors." Yeah. And I thought that was beautiful. I love that because I'm that way. It's I believe in eternal life, and I believe that it's a celebration. If you've lived a good life, this isn't all there. This can't be all there is, right? But Jana left a legacy. She left a legacy. There's a home in Zambia, Jannas House. And we've actually got a picture of you at Janna's House. I always say opening day is a big term in baseball, but opening day was January 1st, 2017, when you opened Janna's House. Tell us about that experience.
So the Tree of Life Village is in Lusaka, Zambia, which is kind of the south central part of Africa. It's the highest populated area with HIV in the world. And so we got connected back in 2013. Tom Ball, who's a good friend of mine, lives here in Austin. Tom's daughter, Berkeley, was involved with this group called Family Legacy out of Dallas, and they had went the year before, but he was really trying to. Tom played baseball for the University of Texas years ago, and he really wanted to kind of see if the Express could donate. We could donate baseballs or any extra equipment, and so I remember calling Reese saying, "Hey man, I got this opportunity." Tom Ball reached out. He's like, Chris, I got an idea. He's like, I think it'd be a great father-son trip for you and Chase to going into Chase's senior year of baseball. And I'd never been overseas. I'd been to the Bahamas. I'd been to Mexico a couple of times, but I'm like, and I'm
Africa.
yeah, I'm like, we're flying to Dubai, 16 hours to Dubai and then another 8 hours to Africa. I mean, I'm talking about anxiety. But long story short, Chase and I went that first year. One of my good friends, one of my best friends, Jeremy Trogic, who was a coach at Cedar Ridge High School at the time, went with us, and we went over and we kind of did our Round Rock Express baseball camp with these orphans, and a lot of the kids there were double orphans. And so what the Tree of House, the Tree of Life Villages is there's houses, and they're able to pull kids out of the slums of Lusaka. And when they get 12 kids, they can put them in a house. They've got a house mom that lives with them, and they go to American schooling. But the week between Christmas and New Year's, they kind of do a little baseball camp for the kids that can't go back out. And so we did it, and it was just amazing. And you think you're going to go over there and you're going to change those kids' life, but what happens is they change you. And the very first year, there was a kid named Luke that we connected with, and Luke was 14 at the time, and Luke. I just remember one of the neatest things was we were walking after one of the camps, walking back to the mess hall or where we'd eat our food and stuff, and Luke just grabbed my hand, and he just walked with me the whole time. And I was like,
Really?
My own 14-year-old Luke won't grab my hand, but these kids just wanted to be, held and touched, and they needed love. And so, Luke was a double orphan where mom and dad both had HIV. Dad shoots mom and then commits suicide right in front of Luke. And so here Luke goes to this deal. And so these kids have seen the worst of the worst. And so we got back, was talking to Jana about it, and Chase just had a calling. And that next fall, the Tree of Life was our Family Legacy was doing a dinner up in Dallas, and George W. Bush was actually the keynote speaker, and we really wanted to go. And so we got a chance to listen to him. Probably his biggest legacy as being the president was the signing the bill to give
PEPFAR.
Get the medication over there. And so he spoke on that, and we always thought when Chase graduated college that he might want to go and do missionary work. And so I told Jana, look, we got to go over there. You got to see it, because you've got to be comfortable if he wants to do this. And the other thing is we got to bring Luke, because Luke needs to realize that every 14-year-old doesn't have an iPhone. And so it's kind of a family trip. So between 14 and 15, our whole family went, and it just changed Jana. And she loved it. She connected with a lot of those kids. And we flew back in January of 15, and of course 6 months later she gets diagnosed, and 11 months later she passes. And the day after her funeral, Reed Ryan called me and said, hey, listen, I'm just, you run my business, but I want to make sure you're good, and just kind of thinking ahead, and I want to think for you. Christmas time's going to be tough. What if we go back to Africa and do that trip? And I was like, Reed, that's the last thing I'm thinking about right now. And I was really just trying to catch my breath with what we went through. And the next week, him and Luke and Jackson were playing summer baseball together, and we were playing in College Station, and Reed's like, hey, let's go to lunch. And we went to lunch. Hey, I want to talk to you about it. And I was like, Reed, he's like, no, listen, you're going to talk to me. He's like, this is what we're doing. He's like, we're going to go to Africa. And I already talked to Family Legacy, and if we can raise $150,000 by the end of July, we're going to build Jannas House, and it will open up in 2017. And this was like July 5th or something. I'm like, we less than 25 days to do this. And told the boys were with me at lunch. We told my in-laws, and we were pretty excited. And then, I didn't sleep that night because, of course, I was worried. I'm like, man, what if we don't raise the money? And I don't want my boys, they've gone through too much disappointment as it is. And the next day we go back and we're playing the game, and I'm just kind of pacing. He's like, stop. He goes, I know what you're thinking. We're going to get the money. I've talked to my dad. I've talked to Don Sanders. I've talked to the Houston Astros. I've got people that are willing to write a check right now to get this thing covered. But everybody was calling to say, how can we help these? What can we do? And we did a fundraiser, and we ended up raising like $350,000 in a matter of less than 2 months. Yeah. And then in June or January 1st of 2017, 21 of our closest friends flew out, and we opened up Jannas House.
That is awesome. It looked like those little girls had cupcakes on their breakfast plate. I'm like, they hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
They
were pretty excited. That was a breakfast that we had. We opened the house and they had a big party out front, and then we got to walk in and we got to sit. We got to pick 12 girls, and it's pretty neat because Americans get to sponsor kids that are living in the houses, and so a lot of our friends that we knew sponsored a lot of the girls that went in the Janna's house. And so it was pretty neat. And so, of course, we took a lot of pictures, and at the stadium the other night, there was a lady that had a Janna's house shirt on. That was pretty cool.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. When President Bush was leaving office, he asked President Obama, incoming President Obama, he said, there's one thing I'd like for you to keep going, and that's PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And he did.
Yep.
He did. Because it's like your show to run, but I'd like for you to keep doing this. So yeah, that's very cool. Tell us about the scholarship.
So, one of the things I think with both boys is, look, we want to honor Jana, and I always want to honor their mom for them. And Jana is always going to be a part of my life. People, I grieved for a long time, and people were like, you got to move on. It's like, you never move on. You move forward.
You move through. Yeah.
And so, look, 7 years ago today, I had the opportunity to meet Lindsay Vogel, my fiance. And, little did I know 7 years ago we were going to connect, and we're scheduled to get married October 21st. But God put her in my life, and I believe that. One, the patience she has for me, because I was all over the place. I tell her I was the original train wreck. But
no, that was me.
but to give her the patience and for the grace that she's given me to kind of work through this. And she's a psychotherapist, so she knows the ups and downs and the things that I've went through. And I think the thing that kind of opened my eyes this time last year was just some of the childhood trauma that I never processed. And then you have the incident with my dad, and then Jana, and so it just. And then once the kids, I empty nested, I was kind of lost. Like everything I worked for in my life, I got. And then that grenade blew up, and it's like, okay, now what am I doing? And so, for me, you kind of going in parallels, and you want to honor your late wife and the boy's mother, but you also know that they're going to go off and live their lives and do great things. And it's like, what's going to happen to me? What's my next chapter of my life? And so, I'm blessed that Lindsay's given me grace, and I look forward to starting the life. The boys love her. But I think one of the things that we kind of talked about was the great thing about Janna's House is that we did this. We're doing something really neat that Jana would want to do. It was important to her. But around here, it's like, what could we do? The other thing she loved was watching her boys play the game of baseball. And both boys played at Round Rock High School. They played for Coach John Carter. And Johnny was great to him. And so Round Rock Partners in Education, they do different scholarships. And so, I thought it was a great way to kind of, we give a scholarship to a Round Rock Dragon baseball player every year, and we give a scholarship to a softball or baseball player within the Round Rock ISD district every year. And so it's a neat way for some of our friends to kind of donate and just, know that they're giving a scholarship or giving money that goes to a scholarship that's going to help these kids out. But more importantly, it's in Jana's name. It's the Team Jana Memorial Scholarship.
Yeah, that's very awesome, actually. And you alluded to it earlier, and I want to emphasize how good that Nolan Ryan's family and Don Sanders' family was to you and your family during the worst period of your adult life. And it even strikes a bigger chord when you think about back in the 1990s when Jana was missing work and they were docking her pay. That never happened to you.
Yeah,
that never happened to you.
I guess it started with Reed and Reese, and that's who. At the time I was reporting to Reese, but Reed was right there with them, and so I remember two things that Reese. When I called Reese, is like, look, let's focus on her. We'll get this, and Tim Jackson stepped up, and then Dave Fendrick was the president before me. He had just retired. He actually came back and worked part-time and helped Tim out. And
nice.
So they covered the stadium and the day-to-day stuff, which allowed me to focus on Jana. And, I remember Reed saying one day called me and is like, he was just mad with the whole, man, I can't believe she got this. And, your emotions are crazy because someone close to you is going through this. And he's like, look, I don't want you to worry about work. Don't worry about a paycheck. It's going to be there, as long as you need it. And they've just been unbelievable. Don and Brett Sanders, the connections that they had with just being able to get us the looks at MD Anderson and just, we'd done some fundraisers. We have great insurance at the Round Rock Express, but when you go through cancer, you're clearing out your savings pretty quick because it's just some of the things they won't pay for. And, we were trying everything. And so, to have the resources that those guys had and the support was just unbelievable. It's just, I tell people, sometimes the crazy hours we work on the things we do, and they're like, man, you just, and I'm like, I do it because what those guys did for me.
Sure.
And the toughest part of my life, a lot of this stuff is easy compared to what they were doing for me. And so, there was about 1,800 people at Janna's funeral. Nolan was in the second row, and I mean, it hit him and his wife, Ruth. Ruth was real close to Jana, and, you would have thought it was their daughter, I mean, that's how close they were with us. And, just I've been very blessed to have some amazing people in my life. And, I tell people all the time, on social, sometimes if I post on Instagram or Twitter, it's a hashtag baseball family, because it's what it is. It's this community that we're a part of, and this baseball family that got us through it.
That's great. I want to finish with a baseball story. You got that unique connection to Nolan Ryan. Tell us a story.
I think one of the best ones was the day that I actually became a Christian. So I talked a little bit earlier about, when Jana passed, I met Father Paul and I went through this RCIA program. Mm-hmm. So RCIA means Rite of Christian Initiation in the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Well, I started that in the fall of 94. And in 95, I was playing baseball for the University of Houston. And so when you go through that process, the final day is the big Easter vigil, the Saturday before Easter Sunday the next year. And, you're going to class every week. And then, I'd been baptized, so I was going to get my take first communion and get my confirmation, and at that Easter vigil on that Sunday, on that Saturday. And so playing for University of Houston that year, it was the last year of the Southwest Conference. And so the Southwest Conference had a preseason tournament, and you played those teams in preseason tournament. That there was one team you would not play, but those were counted as conference games. So you'd have to play that game later in the year whenever you were playing that, whoever you missed. Well, it just happened to be that TCU is the team we didn't play in the tournament. So when we went up to TCU Easter weekend, instead of playing a 3-game series, we had to play a 4-game series. So we go up there. The first day is going to be, we're going to play a doubleheader on Good Friday and then a doubleheader on Holy Saturday. Well, I already had told my coach, Coach Noble, hey, I'm going to come up, but I've got to leave. I'm going to miss the 4th game. I'll leave after the 3rd game on Saturday to come back, catch an early flight, and come do my Easter vigil. And so he's like, that's fine. I was a utility player. It wasn't like I was the star player, so he was fine with me leaving. And so we get over there, and of course the big talk at the time was Reese Ryan was playing for TCU, and Nolan had just retired, and Nolan was the volunteer baseball coach. Mm-hmm. And of course all of us were excited, especially me, the kid that shares the same birthday and grew up in Houston watching him. And I just remember that first day where, we get to practice, or we get there and we're doing batting practice, and he's out there, and to see him come out, and the first game we get beat like 8-0, and we used a couple of pitchers, and so the next game we're getting beat. I think it was like 10-1 in the 3rd inning, and they didn't allow us to expand our travel roster, so we only had so many pitchers and so many position players. And about that time, Coach Noble looked at me, and my nickname was Almy, and he goes, Almy, you want to pitch? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you want me to pitch? I was a utility guy, middle infielder, second baseman, shortstop. I was like, you want me to pitch with Nolan Ryan sitting right over there? I was like, yeah, I want to pitch. So I get in the bullpen and I start throwing, and I'm just throwing as fast as I can.
Have you pitched before?
No, I pitched in like Little League. And so I saw him. And so finally bases were loaded, and Coach Noble walks out and he does one of these, and the catcher's like, hey, he's like, I don't need to go out there. And I was like, okay. So I remember just walking out. As I'm walking out, I could see Nolan looking at me, and he was kind of just leaned over the dugout. And so I get up, and I'm like, this is like the coolest thing. And I start throwing, and I threw 17 pitches. I got us out of the inning, and TCU started like taking some of their starters out, and we start chipping away. Run here, 3 runs there, 3 runs there. We win. 17-16, most amazing baseball
Wow.
game ever. And the next morning I wake up and my whole right side of my body, I mean, it's just sore. I mean, and I give her getting to the field and telling Coach Noble, hey, remember, Coach, I'm not going to be able to play the second game, and I go, I don't think I can play the first game. I can't even lift my arm up, and well, just get out there and start running, foul poles. And so as I'm running foul poles, TCU comes out to take batting practice, and about that time, Nolan walks out to center field, and he's a big guy, and he's just kind of stretching, and I'm like, this is probably my one chance in my life to meet Nolan Ryan. And so I kind of come up to him and I'm like, hey, Mr. Ryan, and son, you pitched yesterday? Yes, sir. You're not a pitcher. Yes, sir. He said, well, how are you feeling? I said, well, I'm really sore, but other than that, I'm doing okay. He said, it's kind of a crazy game yesterday. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, just keep doing what you're doing and take a couple of Advil. And so I guess that's where I learned about sponsorships and partnerships with professional baseball. But funny story. And so fast forward when that day I had lunch with Reed, that night he invited us out to, my dad's going to be there. I want you to meet him. I was like, well, Reed, I actually met your dad. And he's like, when? I told him that story. He's like, oh my God, you're in that game. And so that night we came up and Reed opens the door. Dad, Chris pitched in that crazy U of H TCU game. And so, pretty neat.
That's great. It's great coming full circle like that. And now here you are, every day you work with him and the family and everything. It's wonderful. Chris, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story about Jana getting married October 21st, and wish you and Lindsay a life of fulfillment together.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think that's the thing is I'm looking forward to the next chapter with Lindsay and the things that we're going to do and the joy she brings me. And we're all going to go through ups and downs, but I think there's also redemption. And I think the opportunity to kind of, I tell people I've been blessed to have two ladies in my life that I've loved and they love me more importantly. I was telling somebody earlier, I said, I outkicked my coverage twice in my life. So looking forward to October 21st, and then we're going to take off to Italy for a couple of weeks and look forward to doing some great things.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. All right. That is our show for today. And remember that scripture, Romans 8:28. If you're feeling discouraged, if you're feeling like, my life's gone to shit and I can't figure a way out of this, remember God can do anything. He can do anything. We limit him by our disbelief. But I want to thank Chris for coming on today and sharing the story of his life with Jana and the legacy that she has created. I will be back on the audio broadcast tomorrow. So iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcast, I'll be back with a 1-minute inspirational message. Until then, everyone, be well.